Fantasy Football Warriors, we are back. Back, baby. Waiver wire for week 4.
That's correct.
Week 4, baby. Monday night game just ended.
Well,
The Bills
Monday night games.
games.
That's right.
That's right. It was doubleheader Monday. The Bills just stomped a mud hole and walked it dry on the Jags.
What are
Bengals
the
in
odds
Washington.
Doug Peterson gets fired by halfway through the season?
Bengals in Washington had a nice competitive game on Monday night.
Jaden Daniels looking good.
It's a beautiful thing.
Love to see it.
Love to see it.
Probably 71 total points in that game. Beautiful game.
Man, out of control. So, here we go. We're going to go through the waiver wire options for week 4. And for the Tank Sinatra, Eddie Bravo, we're going to get to it. Let's get it. All right, high-end options. Juwan Jennings.
If you didn't catch our start, sit, short we uploaded on Saturday, but we had Juwan Jennings in there as a spot start if you needed him, and went off for like 11 receptions, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. So
Sarge.
Beautiful. It wasn't necessarily fluky neither. 40% target share, which was the highest target share of any game in his career.
Sarge.
So the usage was strong. He played more snaps than Brandon Ayuk. I think he had the most snaps out of every receiver on the team, if my memory serves me correct. He's a solid start until Kittle and Debo return.
Yeah, for sure.
He's clearly got the trust of Brock Purdy, and obviously there was a lot going on
even
here.
Brandon Ayuk
that
game.
Yeah, for sure.
It was out of control.
Part of the reason we recommended Juwan Jennings, though, is because the Rams are in a top 11 passing matchup, so he's not going to go out there and do this every week. That's why I'm hesitant to say, how much of a role he's going to continue to have. Obviously, we're going to have to monitor Kittle and Debo's health because that's a big time for him. Once they come back, his value's kind of gone, but until then, he's a priority add. He's probably going to be a really solid flex option, if not low-end wide receiver 2. We'll see how it shakes out coming into this next week, but lot to be excited about. Obviously, when you put up, as many points as he did, he's got to get picked up, and we'll see how it continues to unfold.
Yeah,
but
you have to roster him. He's not going to go out and score 3 touchdowns every game, or maybe even again.
Yeah.
Right? This could have been if you missed it, you missed it, right? But for right now, in the short term, he should be rostered. He can come in and maybe win you a week in a pinch.
Yeah.
Another pinch, just like this week. People that were in a pinch and rostered him, I'm sure he contributed to helping someone win their league.
I got Juwan Jennings this week. Someone I played in one of our leagues had Juwan Jennings in there. So
Yep.
You got Juwan Jennings, didn't you? Somewhere.
Oh, I did play Juwan Jennings somewhere.
We got Juwan Jennings somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, roster him, grab him off the wire if he's still there, and he could be a useful piece for you later down the road. Again, Kittle's coming back, Samuel's coming back at some point as well. Obviously, when that happens, the Juwan Jennings parade will have passed by, but for the short term.
Yeah, how I would play it is if you need an option in the flex or at wide receiver now, maybe you have Cooper Kupp, right, and you need someone now to kind of fill that void, go get Juwan Jennings. I think he can provide some value there. But if you are set and you don't need production now, I probably wouldn't go after Juwan Jennings.
Right.
So that's how I would play it.
Yeah,
Moving on into Kamal. Man. Damn it, guys. Cole Kmet.
That's it. It is so stuck.
Kamal.
I am going to call him Kamal.
We're not supposed to talk about the Kamal, but there's a bloody Kamal.
But there's a bloody Kamal.
Cole Kmet, 81% of the snaps, a 24% target share. Obviously, Caleb Williams threw for 367 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
And dropped back to pass the most in the league this week at, I think, 48 dropbacks. That's a lot. However, the Bears are averaging the second most dropbacks per game, so more weeks like these are ahead. They are just running, or they're throwing the ball at one of the highest rates in the league right now. DeAndre Swift in the rushing attack cannot get going, so I think that'll continue for the most part. So if Cole Kmet can see the field and not be being hampered by Gerald Everett, Mercedes Lewis, then we always knew Cole Kmet is a very talented tight end, and by far and away the most talented tight end on the roster. I never understood why they were going to run this weird committee tight end. Didn't make any sense ever.
But it's the Bears.
So with what we saw this week, where it was the Cole Kmet show at the tight end, obviously Caleb was looking for him. He led the team in targets and technically receiving production. He had the most receptions and the second most yards on the team with 90-something yards. So the production was there. We know the talent is there. And we've got the usage now kind of coming along. So I think he's a priority add for just about everyone. Because, I mean, the tight end position's kind of been kind of sad. Obviously, we just had Dalton Kincaid have a good week on Monday night here. But other than that, it's kind of been meh over here in the tight end.
Another
so I
thing
think
to monitor, too, is Keenan Allen's return and how that may or may not affect his usage, right?
But still, tight end getting that usage of that talent on a team that's going to pass this much that just produced 10 receptions and 90-something yards needs to be rostered. You need to be trying to get him on your fantasy squad, because if this continues, you got a solid option at tight end.
Absolutely.
That is always great to have. Moving on, more Bears action. I just talked about DeAndre Swift in the rushing attack. DeAndre Swift has not been great. In fairness to him, 93% of his rushing yards have come after contact, so it's not all his fault, because, I mean, the Bears' O-line is atrocious. I don't know, what any of you watching this video have or haven't seen, but there's this video of they're on the goal line last week against the Colts, and literally a second after the snap, 4 of the offensive linemen are just on the floor. Not blocking, not doing anything. Like, the O-line is atrocious. It is a train wreck.
I'm picturing the...
Have you seen the picture?
I have seen it. I'm picturing it.
It's pretty bad. Last week, Rashawn Johnson, it was his first game getting touches here. He had 12 touches for 62 total yards. That's the best running back performance we've seen out of the Bears this season. If they give Rashawn Johnson the nod, who they just drafted last season, a talented prospect, I think Rashawn Johnson could run away with this job. And until the O-line gets together, you're going to have a low floor and you're going to have a capped ceiling here. But if this offense gets gelling and gets moving and Rashawn Johnson takes over the workload, you could have a solid, I think, RB2 out. So
now, in all fairness, too, right, the O-line is god-awful, right? And DeAndre Swift is averaging like
1.5 yards per carry. Yeah, it's bad.
It is 5 or 8, right? Yards per carry. But Khalil Herbert, in the same situation, produced more than Swift, right?
And so Rashawn Johnson has produced more than Khalil Herbert.
Right. So I think even Rashawn Johnson behind this line has the ability to maybe make something of it.
Yeah.
Right? So that is definitely, just to add to your point, that is definitely someone that is worth looking at and getting on your roster.
For sure. Moving into the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton.
The Red Rifle!
Bryce Young is officially cooked. It is over.
It is done. It is done.
Andy Dalton has the only QB this season to throw for 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns in a single game. That is like the best passing production that we've seen this entire season. Andy Dalton just steps in and says, I'm just going to sling it.
You know what? I'm just going to do it.
Yep. So if you've been streaming at QB, he is a priority add.
Yes, he
is. If you are someone...
I think 1-point-something% rostered.
Yeah,
he's available in over 98% of leagues, man. Out of control.
So please be rostering Andy Dalton if you are. Honestly, let's see here. If you don't have one of the top 8 quarterbacks, I would say go after him. If you're rostering Anthony Richardson, I would say go after him, because Anthony Richardson has looked really poor. I think he am
shopping this weekend.
Gets it together down the stretch, but at the end of the game, at the end of the day, Fantasy football is a weekly game. You have to win weeks now. You can play the long game. You got to think ahead, but you also need to be winning weeks now. So you can't be sacrificing weeks for Anthony Richardson right now if he can't play up to speed. You're not dropping Anthony Richardson, but there is an argument to be made here that you should be grabbing Andy Dalton so that you have options here matchup-wise until Anthony Richardson shows that he can produce consistently. So,
and we have other QB options coming up too.
So
for sure, yeah.
Andy Dalton needs to be rostered if he can continue to produce like this, which I think given
now my fear is that we've seen Andy Dalton kind of fly by like a comet before, and then
I was just going to get to that. I believe this could be sustainable because of the system they have in place. Deontay Johnson's good, and the O-line has been actually really good. And Dave Canales, as the head coach and the play caller, obviously we've seen him help Baker Mayfield out last year and others before that. So the staff and the environment around him, I think, should be conducive to sustainable success for Andy Dalton.
And he already has chemistry with Thielen.
I said on Sunday that Andy Dalton is going to be this year's Joe Flacco.
You did say it.
We'll see. We'll see. Another victory lap. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how this continues to pan out. Mid-tier options. We talked about Jalen Tolbert last week. His target share went down, but he still played a similar number of snaps. He's the locked-in wide receiver 3 on this team. He's averaging 13.7 PPR fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks, which is fine. Flex value here. I think he can start in a pinch. Bye weeks will be coming up in... Is the first bye week, week 5?
They're coming up pretty quick here.
They're coming up, so rostering a player like Jalen Tolbert is a good bet to kind of fill in as need be. And if something were to ever happen to Brandon Cooks, he would elevate into that wide receiver 2 spot. And so I think it could be he's an option here as someone to roster, as insurance, as fill-ins. So nothing to blow away here, but Jalen Tolbert had another fine performance. Emmanuel Wilson.
It is week 5.
Week 5. Okay, I was right. That's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Emmanuel Wilson, back up to Josh Jacobs here with Marshawn Lloyd on IR.
He was really surprising to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, he played pretty well week 1, 4 touches for 46 yards. Second week didn't see much, but this week they had a evener split. So in the first half it was 5 touches to 8 in favor of Jacobs. Then in the second half, obviously they blew away the Titans, so this was a leading game
he was
script.
coming in just because it was such a decisive victory.
For sure.
I get that, but I just didn't see I didn't see anyone else but Marshawn Lloyd in that role, and I didn't see anyone else taking any type of role like that until Marshawn Lloyd came back.
Yeah.
So that's why he was kind of surprising to me.
And then in the second half, it was 9 touches to 7 in favor of Emmanuel Wilson. Like I said, the leading game skip, there's a typo there, helped, but it is possible he could play himself into a role if he continues to play really well. Obviously, Matt LaFleur has a consistent pattern of wanting to have kind of a dual backfield going on. So if he plays himself into that role, Emmanuel Wilson could be someone who has value, once again, as a fill-in.
Especially if it's a favorable matchup. You'd kind of monitor that like, oh, well, this maybe could be a week for Wilson if you need him in a pinch. But definitely in the right matchup, though.
Yep. Last week we talked about how Tutu Atwell was probably the best bet here in this matchup as he led the team in targets after Cooper Kupp left. That kind of came to fruition. Tutu Atwell led the team with a 22% target share. I think he's a solid flex option until Puka Kupp comes back. He's going to get his run, and he has upside every week. We've seen him blow up for huge receptions with a touchdown, and that's kind of his role. Surprisingly, because you wouldn't expect that when you look at him, but he's someone who has a good downfield role, and clearly Matthew Stafford trusts him. So if Puka and Kupp remain out for however long they are going to, I think he's a fine flex option.
And I'm pretty sure we mentioned that, too, when Cooper Kupp went down. Injury last year. Was it last year? Or the year before? Tutu Atwell was the benefactor of it. Not last year when Puka blew up, so probably maybe year before that he was out.
Think so.
For a little bit, Tutu Atwell was the guy that was the benefactor there. So, again, you never know. In a pinch, he could come through for you.
Yep. Michael Wilson has averaged 79% of the snaps across the last 3 weeks. He has a 20% target share over the last 2. He's played himself into a role here as the wide receiver 2 on this team. That's consistent with camp news and offseason reports. So as the wide receiver 2 on this team, he can be productive. He can have his weeks. Obviously, it's going to be Marvin Harrison for the most part, and
Trey McBride.
I think Trey McBride will kind of produce a little bit better in the future. Not that he's been bad, but certainly not what you would have hoped. So I think Michael Wilson is a fine,
for sure.
Once again, fill-in player as we're approaching bye weeks here, as someone you can put in and who could get you a solid production line here so that you're not losing your week because of it.
Right.
Low-end options, Demario Douglas came out with a stronger performance here. He's ran the most routes out of all the wide receivers on the team. Across all 3 weeks, he has a 17% of targets here. Here's the thing, though. Until Drake May takes over, it's hard for me to recommend him as anything other than kind of a stash. 30% of his targets last week came once May came in. May played, 6 minutes?
If that.
And Drake May already targeted him 3 times, so...
You can see it.
Yeah, but until then, the offense and the passing department just isn't really getting rolling, so he's no more than a stash, but if Drake May takes over and this offense can be somewhat okay in the passing department, Demario Douglas is probably the one that benefits the most. I think that's the person we can count on with the most consistency. I still like Jalen Polk as a late season stash, just because he's, I think, just as a prospect, kind of the most talented guy there. But Demario Douglas is the one that's showing signs that he could be productive.
And he's the veteran.
Yeah. So Tyler Beatty. This one's definitely kind of a deeper league ad. He's probably, most people probably haven't even heard of this guy, but he's the borderline third stringer for the Broncos. In the first 2 weeks, he logged 1 carry, which went for 16 yards. Last week, he had 9 carries, and just with that, he's already has more rushing yards than any other running back on the team.
Get it.
I've been talking about how putrid the running game has been for the Broncos. It did not change this week, but except for Tyler Beatty. Obviously, some of this has to do with the fact that he's the third stringer, and so these, backup running backs tend to get the easier runs when the boxes aren't stacked, defenses aren't keyed in on them. So there's reasons to believe that Tyler Beatty, it's kind of a flash in the pan, not anything to be overly concerned with. That's why I said a deeper league ad here.
Definitely.
But at the end of the day, he has clearly been their best rusher so far. If he works himself into a workload or an injury happens by some miracle, we're talking about some upside cases here. So just someone to monitor. And if you're in a deeper league with a deeper bench, he's someone I would be fine adding and kind of stashing as just injury insurance and just kind of seeing because
do not pull this guy off the wire and then go play him.
No, absolutely
Don't
not.
do that.
He had 9 carries for 70 yards this week, which was, out of control crazy. Like I said, he's been by far the most productive rusher for the Broncos through these first 3 weeks. But until we see like a role actually manifest through an injury or otherwise, don't be starting him. But this is just kind of something to monitor here just because Jaleel and Javonte have struggled so much. Our streaming options, Justin Fields at the Colts.
Fields.
The Colts have allowed top 10 fantasy finish. Man, words are hard today. Allowed a top 10 fantasy finish 2 out of the last 3 weeks. I think he's a good call here to finish as a top 10 QB this week.
He has proven that maybe the Bears were the problem and not him.
I don't know if not him is the right call. I just think everyone was the problem.
Yeah.
We talked in the offseason about how Caleb Williams wasn't walking into as great of a situation as everyone liked to believe just because the coaching staff over there is not good. And it wasn't going to work out as well as everyone thought with Caleb Williams and these star receivers just because the coaching staff has to bring it all together, and we were not confident that they could do that. That's how it's kind of looked so far. Justin Fields is not a amazing NFL quarterback any stretch of the imagination either, but clearly you could say the coaching staff was holding him back some as well, and he's finding kind of a good rhythm right now with the Steelers. He's looked pretty good from an NFL perspective. He had a good fantasy finish this week. I think this is another week we could be looking at another solid fantasy line for Justin Fields given the matchup.
Yeah, for him right now, it's, he went, a decent 25 for 32. I think he threw for like 240, 245, something like that, and 2 tutties, right? His rushing is what's holding him back right now from being a fantasy gem. Right? Yeah. It's not showing the rushing ability that he did when he was with Chicago, right? But if that rushing ability gets on par with the way he's passing right now, he just finished QB9.
Yeah.
Right? And if his rushing gets on par with how his passing is going right now, he could be a top 5 QB for you. Easy. Like you said, Justin Fields isn't necessarily I don't know if you want to consider him a great quarterback, but fantasy friendly, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if he gets that going, you got yourself someone there. So if you can land him off the wire, if you need him, like even me, Anthony Richardson, right? I could probably, if I could find Justin Fields on the wire, I could probably put him in, and he can maybe give me some of that, what I'm looking for, what I was looking for out of Anthony Richardson, right? And then I stash Anthony Richardson, hope for that to get better, and I got a rushing quarterback that can potentially, get better there, right?
Yeah.
Right now he's rushing at the 4th highest rate of all, out of all the QBs. So definitely worth a stream and a play. If you need a QB, go get him.
Personally, I would recommend a stream this week and a stash afterward, just because he hasn't shown. We'll see what he does this week, but I would prefer to stream, and then he's kind of becomes a stash and see if the upside here kind of manifests.
So in the right matchup.
Yeah, I think so right now, until we kind of see the rushing and everything really come together. Right. Just because this is, we talked about it last week, how the Steelers are one of the run-heaviest teams in the league, so it's just not an offensive environment necessarily that is going to be conducive to fantasy.
Need him to run
fantasy points very often, but this is a week that is good. For another QB that has a good matchup is Sam Darnold, who's been playing very well. Yep.
Let's go, baby.
The Packers defensively have actually been pretty dang good, but they are allowing top 10 in passing yards per game, passing touchdowns, and drop backs allowed this season. So teams are having to pass on the Packers. They're passing at a high rate against the Packers. That keeps Sam Darnold here passing with a good environment to do so.
Yep.
Keeps Sam Darnold as really good streaming options this week. Defensively, I would be streaming the Raiders and the Dolphins simply because the Browns are giving up one of the highest amounts of sacks in the league, and the Titans are giving up one of the highest amount of sacks as well as interceptions. So sacks and interceptions are one of the biggest ways that defenses score points. Play those Raiders and those Dolphins. I think those are who I'd be streaming. If you have the Vikings and you streamed them last week like we talked for, I think they've entered a territory of every week start. I think if you have the Vikings from last week, they're just an every week starter. So keep the Vikings. Do not stream these guys.
For sure.
But if you do not have the Vikings, I am perfectly fine with streaming these guys. I think they can put up good points. That is it for the waiver wire.
Let's go. Week 4, waiver wire. There you go. There's your waiver wire options, your streaming options. We hope that, as always, these videos give you the nuggets to help you win your games, help you win your weeks, help you win your league ultimately, right? So expand the brand. Like, share, subscribe, spread the word, spread the love. For the Tank Sinatra, this is Eddie Bravo. We'll see you next time.